learning. Lesson 6 is the next piece of advice isn't for you. So this next piece of advice isn't for you. This lesson is related to advice that even, as I'm doing this right now, it's part of this process, but people get from various sources. It could be from friends and loved ones, but also especially the advice we see from social media or online presences where uh, what I often find puzzling is the advice is often presented as one size fits all. So you need to do this, or you have to do this, or don't do this, or everyone should do this. And sometimes there are general principles that I think can be good, but I think unfortunately because uh, some of the lessons I'll talk about for sure will be related to certainty and how I think our anxiety related to uncertainty leads for us to seek out certainty where it doesn't exist, and also to seek out people who assure us or are so certain about their certainty to calm that anxiety. So I think what we see is people giving advice that fits that mold, that it's very clear, very black and white, and this is the only way that it is. But the reason why this lesson is called "This Next Piece of Advice Isn't for You" is because we have to be aware that what might be good advice for one person might be bad advice for someone else. Or when one person might need to go in a certain direction, the other person might have to actually go the other way. So, for example, you might see something, a social media influencer saying, like, you need to speak your mind and you have to always say what you think, and don't worry about what people are saying, and say what you have to say, which overall has good principles to it. But someone might hear that who already in their relationships is taking up too much space. Someone who has a more narcissistic type of personality or personality traits, or someone who can be very demanding emotionally, they maybe are already talking too much in their relationships. Even if we think of it, people give this blanket advice, and how could everyone talk more? Then, if everyone turns off their computer after that, everyone's just yelling at each other and no one's listening, right? We have to have speakers and listeners and a back and forth in conversations, but often advice is presented in this very black and white way. So someone might hear that type of advice and it might be so important for them because they are holding back too much. They are not speaking their mind. They are not sharing their feelings. Just talking about missed communication, maybe so often they're holding back what's going on for them. And so that could be very important for them to hear that type of advice and to take that type of advice to heart and to act on it. But as I was saying, there's someone else who that advice might be the exact wrong thing. They might need actually, in your relationships, it might be important for you to also think about the other person more. It seems that you are not taking them into account enough, and you are just focusing too much on your side and expecting them to see things your way. So we have to be very careful, because the other thing is we often get drawn towards the advice that already confirms what we think or how we are. So maybe if you are someone who always speaks your mind and you say things no matter what, and you don't care if you offend someone, you won't even worry about that, even if it's a loved one, you might be drawn to someone who says you're doing things the right way. And so often we see this where people say, oh, see, I was right. Look at what this person says. This person's an expert. And so they're basically saying I'm right and you're wrong. I often see this in therapy over time, working especially with couples or with families where there's multiple people, where sometimes someone will agree with me until I disagree with them. And so when I'm agreeing with them, they might even show in different ways, or even explicitly say, oh, see, this guy knows what he's talking about. He's right. He's telling me that I'm right. And then if I disagree with them, at some point, all of a sudden it's, well, what do you know? And I'm still not so old, but especially when I was younger, often this thing, oh, how old are you? Or whether they directly ask or imply that, all of a sudden, it seemed like my advice wasn't credible anymore. So we know that we often seek advice that is comforting for us and comforting to us, and we have to be very careful about that. I think there's a whole realm of psychotherapy, but especially the influencers and people who are online talking about mental health. And I think I have fallen into this trap at times, and I'm trying to be aware of that. Maybe in earlier years, even it still might be there. This tendency I'm talking about is that it's a very easy place to go to tell people you are right. The people that hurt you are so bad and they're so wrong, and what they did was so wrong. You are the victim of what they've done to you. Anything you're going through now that even is bad is their fault. It's not yours. How could you, do anything based on what's happened to you and what they did? Even what you've done is actually incredible, and they're the problem. You are right. They are wrong. You're the victim. They're the perpetrator, and you're allowed to just forever be sad about this. And so promoting the victim mentality actually can get you a lot of attention because it feels good. I mean, it just understandably feels good for someone to tell you that you are right, they are wrong. The person that you thought hurt you, they really hurt you so bad, and they were so bad in how they hurt you, and they're a bad person and all these things. Anything you don't get done, that's not on you. That's on them, and that's on what happened to you because you've been the victim of all these horrible things. And you're just the good one here, and they're the bad one. It, of course, does feel good to hear that. So we can understand our desire to hear that. We can understand why it would be popular for someone to say that. But unfortunately, it's a very hurtful mentality for us to have. Now, quickly, or although I rarely say things quickly, but quickly I'll kind of caveat that this doesn't mean that no one is a victim of things, or it doesn't mean that abuse or harm doesn't have an impact in any way, and that anytime someone's complaining or anytime someone brings up something that's happened to them, they're playing the victim, because you do hear that too, unfortunately, that other extreme. And this kind of actually relates to this theme of this next piece of advice isn't for you. Sometimes people will say, oh, this is always the case. People are always playing the victim, or they're never playing the victim, or some type of extreme. And it's not the case. It's much more nuanced than that. So I do want to make that very clear, that people have obviously genuinely been hurt by people. It has an impact. It does affect us, and we can't deny that either. What I'm talking about here, and what I'm saying is hurtful or dangerous about the victim mentality, is it's almost like giving someone their whole identity as being a victim. And especially in the therapy type of context, or the mental health professional or online professional, or influencer that is helping. You are the victim. I am the healer and the helper. So you get to feel good that you were the victim. Anything you can't do, it's not your fault. Anything bad in your life, it's not your fault. They were wrong, you were right. I'm this benevolent helper. I'm here to care for you. I see how bad it was, what you went through. I see how bad they were. Don't worry, here, you don't have to do anything, or there. I don't know what I'm saying there. You don't have to worry about, taking your life by the reins or having any control, because it's your fault. It's not your fault that this has happened to you. And so what can be a more balanced, I would say, type of a response, or what we really need, is let's recognize the pains and what has happened to you. That's very real and has left marks and impacts on you, and we have to be aware of that. We can't deny that either. So it's not black or white. And so it's not like, and it's going to be up to you what you will now do with your life going forward based on what's happened to you. So what happened to you isn't your fault when you were, especially, let's say, a child. But now what you're going to do with that is up to you. That is your responsibility. The first part wasn't your responsibility. You couldn't control that. But what you do with that is. And so if we want to just only stay stuck and identify as the victim. So we are the victim of what's happened to us, but is that our identity? Because if it's your identity, then staying stuck there is going to have some value for you. You won't want to lose that. And unfortunately, there is a lot out there that really is encouraging this type of mindset, because it's easy for it to gain attention, because it's a type of like a pacifier. It's like a drug that calms us. You're all right. Nothing you've ever done is wrong. Everyone else around you is wrong. Don't worry about, taking responsibility for your life. It's not even possible. It's not even expected. Just let go. And I'm here to tell you, and, in return, without me saying this, but in return, you're going to make me feel good that I'm this helpful person to you. And as I said, I think I've leaned that way, because the whole, a big part of therapy is helping people get in touch with their feelings, helping people get in touch with the pain from their past. And I think that's very, very good and very meaningful. However, sometimes we might push it too far in that direction. And that's where we want to be careful, where, again, this victim type of mentality can can take over, and this victim identity can become very powerful and pervasive, and that can be hard to break. So, as I was saying, with all of this, like, we have to be aware. It's good to learn from other people, take advice from people, hear people's perspective on things. But we have to be very careful that what advice we take, first of all, that there isn't a one size fits all, that there's not a type of advice that's going to work for everyone. Also be mindful of what type of advice we're drawn towards, because we tend to be drawn towards the advice that already confirms that what we're doing is right. And of course, that's very dangerous. That's not going to be helpful for us. Often the best advice for us won't feel good the first time you hear it. It usually is going to kind of poke at some holes or touch some sensitive spots on you that you won't like. And I've experienced that myself in my life, that sometimes I even remember in graduate school getting some feedback from supervisors. And I remember one time just feeling bad almost all weekend that, supervisor had pointed something out to me. And I wasn't mad at them, but I was like, are they right? And just kind of dealing with that, and kind of I was pushing back a little bit because it was hurtful, but hurtful in a good way, a growing pain. And so often the best advice for us will hurt a bit. If the advice, if it feels very, very good, I'm not saying it's always, the case. That's kind of going back to this black and white. It's not always going to feel bad, but often the very good advice feels a little bit off because it has to challenge a bit of our worldview or the way that we do things. It has to make us rethink a little bit and not just do things as we did or same way that we did before. So be aware of this, the advice you're hearing, and advice that someone is giving. And that's why if I do try to give advice, even if it's a specific person, but especially in general, rarely do I think this is like the one way to do things. Even today, I did talk about some things. I think openness in a relationship overall is good. However, even that, sometimes maybe people are being too open in the sense that there isn't space for other things to be there, or too open too soon. It's not always the right thing or the right way. So be aware that not all the advice is for you, and that's why lesson 6 is this next piece of advice isn't for you.